Civil discourse and communication in this country sure as hell seems like it's lost. It seems like we can't talk to one another anymore. It seems like the tough conversations don't happen. They're going to happen here. Welcome to the Back Porch, where we're going to have honest, respectful, civil discourse with prominent individuals at a national and local level, friends, colleagues, and clients. We're going to talk about the tough topics, and we're going to put them out there for you to listen to. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Back Porch. So welcome to the Back Porch, where conversations always are supposed to feel like they're home. So I'm Alex Amazon, your host, and today we're honored to welcome a guy who I consider a friend. He's definitely a leader who's at the forefront of fostering change, progress, and handling all things that are South Miami with Mayor Javier Fernandez. Mayor has been working tirelessly to balance tradition, innovation, making South Miami a beacon of growth, sustainability, community spirit. Doesn't this sound great?
Sounds amazing.
Sounds
Who wrote this for you?
Yeah,
Did I write this for
not
you?
Me. AI. Standing over there with 2 feet and a phone. In today's conversation, we'll explore his vision for the city, challenges of leading during transformative times. We'll ask him a bunch of questions, talk about things in the non-controversial city that is South Miami. We can't do that with every city that we interview their top leader. And in a relaxed, candid spirit that is supposed to be the essence of why we started this podcast at the Back Porch. So settle in, grab your favorite drink, join us, and we're going to dive into some inspiring conversation with South Miami's Mayor, Javier Fernandez.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Good to have you, bud. A little bit of background. So graduate of Colby College, right? Law degree from the University of Miami.
Those are the two institutions. More importantly, a Columbus grad. So some of hopefully your listening audience just had to say that since
it's unbelievable. So you know what's funny is I know where you work, right? So I know where you work.
Exactly.
Yeah. So a couple of weeks ago, I don't know if you know this, I had Roland on here.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, we have a different podcast.
That had to be interesting.
It was.
Yeah.
And he didn't look anywhere dressed as nice as you did. I had to take my jacket off that day with you. I knew I was going to have to wear one. So yeah, and he was here a few weeks ago on the other one, which is the full docket that deals with all the legal stuff as our Florida bar president. And he came in and he was wearing like a short sleeve shirt. And I immediately had to take my jacket off. I immediately had to take my jacket off to dress down. You show up, I had to go to my car and get my jacket. Right. So it was the other
glad
way
to level up the game then.
I did.
So,
I did. Yeah, I'm glad you did. I hope you're listening, Roland. Yeah. So, and you're a land use attorney over there. Really good segue because for some of the things we're going to be talking about today, right? In the city of South Miami gives you 2 hats to wear. One is our mayor and one is somebody who knows the stuff that you'd be doing if you were on the private side doing some of that stuff. And former member of our Florida House of Representatives, you sat on the Commerce Committee, you were on the Pre-K-12 Innovation Subcommittee.
Yeah, that's fun.
Some fun stuff, right? We'll get into that a little bit too. And then I also want to talk about today too, is so when you decided to run, I'm taking this from the internet, everything on the internet is true. So it said that you were interested in increasing and improving parks and green spaces, very Democrat of you, smart downtown growth, septic to sewer transition, and focus on safety and security. I agree with all of those things.
Okay.
All of them. In fact, when I used to live in the city of South Miami, I was, whatever the title was there was a park and rec committee, and I sat on the committee as its chair when I was in the city of South Miami.
Well, you
I'm
already
not a resident anymore.
Oh, you're not a resident anymore. That's right.
Touch you off right here.
There you go.
Touch you off.
There you go. No more jobs.
No more jobs for me. So let's start there real quick, right? Because one of the things that whenever I have a local politician like you, that even though you went to the wrong high school, you grew up here and then you come back and you serve. And I think that's so cool. I love it. And like I told you, we had a mutual friend of ours, Vince Lago, here last week. And I can't sing the praises enough, regardless of whether you guys are good at your job or not, men or women, that you decide to come back, family in tow, and with kids. Your wife and I actually went to college together.
You did? I'm sorry.
I've known her longer than you.
You went to another bad institution.
So many things we don't get to. And, and I think it's important to start with this, right? So off the cuff, we always have conversations, me and other friends that love politics and necessarily don't love where it all is, that do, quote, good people still run for offices. And you being here obviously means yes, in that sense, and that the mayoral part all the way up. Talk to us. What was it that led you? Go back to the House of Representatives, right? Because you also resigned from your seat to go run for the Senate seat for the House in Florida. and now you're our mayor here in South Miami, where my building is located. I may not be a resident.
No,
but I'm
thank
a
you for investing in
commercial building owner.
our small
Yeah,
city.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but talk to me about that. Good people, obviously, with you still run, but it's challenging, right? And what was brought you to the fray of from Tallahassee to now South Miami?
Well, that's a different. I mean, what brought me to the fray originally was maybe the misguided desire in some respects to try to create a legacy beyond my family, right? And to kind of demonstrate for my kids that you can get engaged. And it doesn't have to be in public office, but you can get engaged civically and actually make some changes. So beyond wanting to feel empowered by being in a position where I can once again kind of forge some change, also show them and set an example for them about what I think it is to be a good member of our society, right? In my day-to-day practice, they
don't find being a land use attorney sexy.
They don't connect with it. And so for me, honestly, one of the most rewarding moments was connecting with my daughter in particular, because she's a little bit older, around the public service. And one of the best bills that I probably drafted that unfortunately was never going to get heard for reasons we can talk about later, it came from my daughter and an experience born of her time at Epiphany and her existence as a student in a cafeteria where everything was served on disposable cutlery and silverware, styrofoam trays, and her asking me, this can't be good for the environment. What can we do about it? And so we ended up drafting some legislation to kind of incentivize fast casual restaurants to think about having reusable cutlery, reusable glasses, right, for in service room dining, and trying to offset some of the costs, because obviously that permanent cost, you got to install a water line and dishwashers and things like that. So try to give people an economic incentive and also some branding, some accreditation to kind of market themselves as being a better steward for the environment. That conversation, the idea was born of a conversation with my then 10-year-old. And it was really cool to be able to connect with her about that work as a result. So that was part of the motivation of getting into politics. With respect to South Miami, along the way, you meet a lot of good people. You're right. There are a lot of good people. The overwhelming majority of people serving are good people. Sometimes we're misguided about our positions because we're just, misinformed, ill-informed. We just disagree. But I think for everyone, for the most part, is in it for the right reasons. And I think politicians have a bad rap in today's society. People really don't understand the opportunity cost of serving, but the opportunity of running and losing is equally high. I mean, I can tell you both sides of both those stories. I've had success and I've experienced failure. I was led to South Miami as a result of a conversation with a former commissioner now, friend Josh Liebman, Phil Stoddard, who was a former mayor.
Josh and I also went to college.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Another Gator. My God, surrounded by him.
You're surrounded by him. I supported him. That guy, I feel like he was commissioner for like 37 years.
He was.
It was 12. It was 12.
And he's worse for the wear because of it. Phil and Josh, probably not always aligned. I developed a good rapport with both of them during my time serving in the House, and both thought that it would be good for me to kind of come onto the dais. We had some conversation. Commissioner Corey was equally an advocate of that, and talked about my family. I had made a decision after I lost my Senate race in December of 2020 that I would, while my kids were still home, I would never run for anything that would take me away from home. I ran for the Florida House initially. Some of my friends thought I was crazy. They thought it was, I don't know why they would think this, but because, it's the House or the legislature, the third largest state in the union, but they thought it was kind of a nothing political job. But I ran for it because everything I do, I want to be engaged in, stimulated intellectually. And I thought for me, in terms of my personal journey, going to a small college where they talk about creating lifelong learners, I enjoy the process of learning. And as you know, in practice, you get hyper-specialized. Sometimes your role gets really narrow. For me, running in part beyond the desire to serve was also a way to kind of re-engage on a whole series of topics that I don't come across with in my daily life. Serving on commerce, which regulates, all sorts of regulated industries, gaming, serving on the Healthcare Innovation Committee in a year where the speaker wanted to provide a lot of learning. And for me was very, very engaging intellectually, but it made for a very terrible time practicing law.
Oh, I can imagine.
Because it leads to another time.
Send him or her my way that would ever tell somebody who's going to run for this House seat in Florida, send them my way. And for somebody else that'll help explain to them, no, that's a real job.
It is a real job.
And it's a thankless job to some extent, which is probably where they get that perception a little bit, right? Because you don't hear about that. Everything is about the national. But I'm sure you would agree, which is why I love having our mayors come in and talk is I tell people all the time, like, we all get so polarized about what's happening in DC. I'm the first one. I fight with one of your partners, Pete Gonzalez, all the time.
Oh yeah, I think I'm on the same chat stream.
Yeah, probably. Known Pete for over 20 years.
Yeah.
We fight all the time. People on the internet think we hate each other. We don't. So, but nationally, that's what makes it. But I tell people all the time, the things that most impact you in your life are whatever comes out of your local community where you live. Your parks, your police, your hospital, right? Your garbage and sewer, your mailman or woman, everything around you, your restaurants, your operations, the plastic versus paper straw, whatever it is, everything comes out of your local. That's where you can make the most impact. And I'd love to hear you talk about how you kind of did it kind of for your kids. I'm 100% similar to you in that sense. My kid the other day, my older one who's 17, at a family dinner with some people from out of town, they asked her, what do you want to do? Because she's a junior now in high school. She goes, what do you want to do when she gets? She goes, I want to be a lawyer. And everybody immediately looks like me. I'm like, that's not on me, man. That's not on me. She doesn't even know what I do. She doesn't even come to my office. I think she wants to be a lawyer, not because it's dad, because she watches Suits. But like you talking about how your daughter helped you, you know, my daughters also wrote, we'll call it legislation, but it was in the charter in Pinecrest. They're the ones that brought the little free libraries to Pinecrest with commissioners and mayor and a Hockemer, who's you probably know
very well. Yeah,
a
great lady.
She was instrumental in helping the girls navigate. They did it themselves. So I love that you engaged your kids early and did that. And I think that's a good segue from the kids to your kind of downtown area and the revitalizing of downtown.
Perfect segue. Yeah.
Perfect segue, because that's where the kids used to go.
Yeah, they don't want to go there.
Nobody wants to go anymore in what is Sunset Place. I'm not going to say the rest. I will start by throwing a couple softballs your way when it comes to downtown South Miami, because I used to live in South Miami.
Yeah.
I used to be the neighbor of Walter Harris. That was one of the reasons I left. Just kidding.
Walter, we still love you.
Yeah, Eden, Walter, just kidding. But before we moved to Pinecrest, when I was in South, I loved it, man. It was, we're talking about when the kids were really little. The arts festival, you know, going down to Footworks and our running groups at night and all those things. And half the restaurants that are there now were not there at the time. So the restaurants started coming. Now the development going in front of Casa Cuba is coming. Finally, some level of traction that I'd love to hear from you on with the Sunset Place redevelopment is coming. To me, you can't include the Gables. Gables is too big.
Yeah.
I think it is the most vibrant, non-beach, so suburban little downtown district between the really nice restaurants, the fast casual restaurants, and whatever Sunset Place will turn into. What a gem you have. Talk to me about the process leading up to and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think if I didn't realize it before I was elected, I certainly realize and appreciate it now. Our greatest assets are geography, right? We're in the middle of one of the probably the most dynamic county in the country, right? With a brand in Miami that has been red hot for the last 25 years. We are, I mean, with no disrespect to my colleagues that represent cities south of me, from Homestead to Pinecrest, none of them have two major employers bookending their city, University of Miami and Baptist Hospital, Baptist corporate headquarters on one side as well, South Miami Hospital on the other. None of them have a traditional Main Street that has a transit station, right, at the other end of it. And so I think, you know, we have these intrinsic assets, our geography, major employers, connectivity to transit that puts us in touch with the entire region and other regions in Orlando as well through Brightline, that make it a very unique place. So for me, the challenge is, how do we unleash the growth to complement our historic character while we preserve what's always made us special, right? That small town feel, the tradition of the Elves Parade and all these small community events like the Arts Festival. How do we continue to nurture that part of our identity? And then in terms of the physical space, you know, I fought really hard as we've been working on our zoning code to incentivize people to keep the scale of Sunset Drive in its current form, right? Obviously, we want people to reinvest, improve the quality and stock of the buildings. But in my mind, the money shot for South Miami, hopefully after this transformation is completed 15 years from now and I look back, I want to see the contrast of the old scale Main Street with the new mid-rise.
Well, imagine you
mid-rise development.
I remember the days of getting dropped off there when I was my daughter's ages now.
You're talking about Sunset Place.
Talking about Bakery Center.
Bakery Center. No, I had my first date there.
Get out of here.
Yes. Yeah.
It was not with Anna Marie?
It was not, unfortunately.
Okay, good.
I will not name the young lady, but yes.
Right. That's probably for the best for everyone involved. I remember getting
not the best not to embarrass myself.
No, it's about you. I remember getting dropped off there to either 50% of the time go to a movie or 50% of the time wait till the parents drove off, and then you would jump in your friend's car and go somewhere because there was no cell phones, and you would come back when the movie was over. Dude, go whatever debauchery and come back. But it was packed back then. And then when Sunsets first opened, it was packed then too. And remember when my kids were little, we'd take them to wherever the little place is that was in there to paint the little bowls and dishes and go to the game time and go to the movie theater. And then it was really sad to see how over time it just kind of like.
Yeah, it's lost its energy. The design of it doesn't relate to the rest of the city. But I think it's important to say that its geographic reach is incredibly, incredibly impressive. I mean, today still over almost 1.25 million people go to that movie theater. Which is more than the Marlins draw. And if you look at we've done a retail trade area study, to kind of understand what our opportunities are.
This is the land use attorney.
And you see that people from as far as Miami Gardens come to South Miami. And my guess is that's because of that movie theater. So, I think that regional draw is something we need to try to figure out a way to keep, but put it in a different box so that it's more value creative in terms of the expression of the buildings in the future and its connectivity to the city. Right?
I remember because a lot of the times I think you, especially what you do for a living, you can tell, we saw it in the Grove that you could see the transformation of the Grove coming, for example, a lot of it just simply by the retailers and the types of restaurants that were moving in. And in South Miami, you definitely see it with the restaurants that had moved in, that had been successful. I remember like Outback came years ago and it was a big deal, but they could only open at 4 because there wasn't a big business lunch crowd. Right. So eventually it didn't work.
We still have that problem.
We
still have that problem. So we got to figure out a way to grow our way out of that. We're trying to do some things on the transit side. We're going to be rolling out a new partnership with VIA that's going to expand our trade area reach. So if you're familiar with Metro Connect, we're in the North Dadeland zone. It's going to allow us to connect with another 100,000 residents to bring them into South Miami. We're going to be piloting service outside of our boundaries, which we've not done before, using our PTP money because we want to support our businesses on evenings and weekends to help build their business. So if you live in Northern Pinecrest, you'll be able to get a free ride into South Miami's town center and back home. And some of the southern parts of the Gables,
which is great because Pinecrest doesn't have, for example, one of the reasons South Miami is my community.
We should be your district or your town center, or the SoMe district should be your downtown.
It is for many of us that live there, right? Because of the restaurants, because of the environment, because it's safe, and that's a good kind of when we talk about let's move right over US 1 real quick to the development project that's supposed to include City Hall, that's supposed to include the new development that's going there, and where is that? And talk about it. I'll be the first one, so you don't have to say it since you're the mayor. But my Lord, City Hall, for such a pretty city, is in need of a facelift for some time. That library, I used to walk to it, and so did our nanny when my kids were little. That library got daily traction from my kids back in the day when they were really small. The City Hall that you call your home here, obviously, even we just talk aesthetically, needed a jump. But now we're getting a new City Hall, new development in the city. Talk to us about that, because I think that's part of when we talk about a legacy of what's going to happen. I think the construction of that region, that area around the old library, around the old City Hall is a big one.
Yeah, look, I think as much as we're doing this to try to really give our employees and constituents facilities that respond to their needs today and allow them to work in a dignified space, my real motivation for doing it or wanting to push this project is that the west side of our downtown that has a more institutional character, right? It's been predominantly office or medical office use driven, really needs something else to kind of balance it out, right? To bring some of that activity. I mean, this is right across from the transit station, right? So we need uses that complement what's there during the day, create more vitality, make that area feel less desolate, after traditional work hours. Because if you drive through there, it just kind of feels, it's not that it's abandoned, doesn't seem unsafe, there's just no activity whatsoever, just given the typical daily cycle of the uses that are there, right?
I'll interrupt you for a second. I used to live on 64th Court, basically in Sunset. So to your point, which just reminded me, we would drive rather than walk with the strollers or on our own. What a great opportunity would have been for very urban, right? For my wife and I to say on a Thursday night to have just walked down Sunset from 64th through that area if it was well lit and developed. I'm just thinking past tense. It didn't exist when I was there. We wouldn't do that.
You're 100% right. And so I think, probably your walk to the more lively side of our downtown is probably equivalent of my walk from 85th Street to the town center as well. So and we do it. I did it this weekend to go to the Porch show. But the other reason strategically for me to kind of focus in on it, it's been a longstanding priority, but also it's something, the timeline of which I can control, right? As important as Sunset Place has been, right? Ultimately, the timeline on which that happens is going to be driven by an outside party. All that we can do, and I'm proud to say all that we've done, is get out of the way, right? The biggest obstacle developers have had before was that the city was an obstacle to progress.
Constantly.
So today, we are no longer an obstacle. The benefit of having done that is twofold. That project has the opportunity to move forward on its timeline, consistent with the vision that we've approved. The secondary benefit of that is that it sent a signal to the marketplace that says that we're ready to entertain other responsible development. And so I'm kind of happy to report that, as much as we talk about the new building, that Avalon Bay's building, they've now doubled down and said we want to reinvest in South Miami again or have another site under contract. Deli Lane, which we're going to relocate into the historic space on the corner, they'll anchor a building that's really not had a life. Jan and team there are very excited about moving into a modern building. That'll bring more housing, more investment. It'll accrue to the benefit of our tax base. The bank property, now United Community Bank, First National, when the bank was, family tendered his shares into a larger bank, bought a building down the street, so we're helping them with a relocation. That's allowing them now for the first time to reconsider coming in and submitting a project. We're expecting to come in with a proposal for those 3 lots, Sunset, the big parking lot, the half lot, that are the second biggest land assembly in South Miami, that we actually need to get activated. That could provide for hopefully a public civic space that we desperately need as well to come in. And they have signaled to us that the only reason they're doing that is because they've seen that we're a coherent group on the dais, the last 2 daises, and that we've actually greenlit Sunset Place. So they are now, what it's done is create confidence among investors in the market that they've got a government that they can work with. But, even when you're doing all of those things right, I think we are as a group, really, I work with an extraordinary team of commissioners, our vice mayor commissioners, very collaborative. We are very cordial, very respectful, which is how government should work. The goal has always been to make us predictable, because what I learned working for a mayor in the private sector, in Easton Kasdan, and working for an extraordinary mayor in the public sector, Manny Diaz, is that predictability is the lifeblood of cities, right? If you can make yourself predictable, people will bet on your jurisdiction. And I think that's what's happening in South Miami. That's the greatest success I think that we've shown the last 2 years. And I'm excited about what that means. With City Hall, really, it's about having some autonomy of the execution. We control the dirt. We can set the terms of engagement. And we've been lucky that we were fortunate to have a development partner in 13th Flora that's had a successful track record and wanted to step forward. And I'm excited about getting my kids, my family, because they're heavy users of the library, a modern amenity that's going to serve them, serve other children and families with spaces, like media rooms, like private tutoring rooms, because that's a lot of what happens there today. It's not just a book repository. To meet today's needs, like you see in Pinecrest and other places. And then hopefully we'll get a dignified place for our police officers and our staff to work. But more importantly than all of that, I think, is creating an activity center on the west side that can help kind of transform people's day-to-day perception of that place. And we have another opportunity we don't talk enough about, which is the Underline is coming right to our front door. And so one way I think we can distinguish ourselves as a city is by creating a signature civic space on the Underline, on that City Hall campus, that could make us a destination on that linear amenity. There's not a whole lot of those opportunities elsewhere. We have a chance to get it right. And hopefully tomorrow when I sit down with the developer team, I've seen a design that really honors that vision.
That's awesome. I'm gonna send a text to Arnaud Garzenti here before this thing is over. And I'll tell you, yesterday, I was telling you, we had a mutual friend with Vince Lago, and they have 3 miles of underline that they have over in the Gables. And you're right. When you drive down US 1, you drive down there, you don't see that. And I remember I was joking around with Vince just last week. I said, I remember one of the inspirations for the underline was in Atlanta.
Yeah, the Beltline.
Yeah. And the first time I ever went to the Beltline, I went for a run.
Where'd you go? Ponce City Market?
And I ended up at the market.
Yeah.
And my run went from, I'm going to run 5 miles to, I don't think I ran one.
Yeah, stop and have a beer.
Had a beer, ran into somebody I knew. They were calling friends over. I ended up spending 3 hours there, never ran again. I ended up just walking back, and I had a wonderful day. And the point is while we were sitting there having a beer, and that's, as you know, that's a more robust. It's not going to be like this here. But it was people.
Well, why not? Why can't it be like that?
Well, my point being is that we have, to your point of you're the only uninterrupted civic space. My only point of that is simply that over there, it was above, it was higher up, and it was more contiguous on bars and people walking there. So yes, I think the concept of it is brilliant, which is and I have one right here by my office where it continues to connect. But I hadn't really thought of it until you said how that City Hall space really is, if you walk the underline, might be I don't know if it's the only one, but definitely looks like the best one for purposes of, hey, you know what? I'm going to stop here and I'm going to cross the street here and I'm going to go into the city there and I'm going to actually take advantage. I think the underline was what the city has needed for a long time.
Yeah, look, for me, the idea was born, if you drive out of our town center every day on 73rd Street, as you head westbound to make that left on US 1, the first thing you see is you look across US 1, you see City Hall and that space behind the library. And the underline is programmed, which should be a very dynamic children's activity space, which should relate really well to the library use. But I think we can go beyond that. We can create something that really becomes a center of activity, complemented with some retail or food and beverage offerings on the ground floor. And then you have the civic use and an overbuild. It doesn't have to be that intense. We'll see where we end up in terms of numbers. It's that's the opportunity. And quite honestly, I'm very grateful to our team at the city. I'm grateful to our partners at 13th Floor. I'm grateful to Baptist Hospital Systems. We've engaged them in a conversation about working together to enhance circulation. We're actively working with them on possibly maybe considering a land swap so they can maximize the development of the parcels they own on Second, because that's 62nd to me is also a street that really doesn't inspire a whole lot of attention or interest. And, they are planning to make some future investments. So we want to make sure that when we're thinking about this, we're thinking about not just tomorrow or 2 years, it's really a 10, 20-year horizon. And how can we set the pieces in place long after I'm on so people can execute and create the longest long-term value for the city?
You don't, unless you come here to the city that you're the mayor of, you don't really realize the reality of what I used to say when I used to live here was I would tell people, like, I have a major hospital, like 7 blocks, for anybody else, it's probably within a mile, right? A major hospital within a mile, God forbid you need it. I've got the police station within a mile if I need it,
and less than 2.5 minute response time.
Right. Yeah. And to think of a city this size that has those kinds of amenities that can have a 2.5 minute response time. Fire department also was within a mile of the house. I'm like, I'm good. If I catch on fire, have a medical emergency, or if I get broken into, I'm good.
We got you covered.
We got you covered.
Yeah.
And that's a real unique thing that you have for a city that's this small. And I had the pleasure of serving as the chair of your Finance and Budget Committee for a couple of years.
And thank you for that service. Honestly, you guys are an extraordinary group.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Pales in comparison to the elected ones, but it was nice to just get an inside view of seeing how well run, and I can understand the predictability part of what you speak of. I know affordable housing is a big one for you. We don't have to limit this to South Miami, but in general in the county, because obviously the city itself, we have a lot of people that need affordable housing. We have certain areas of the city of South Miami that would be, that are lower income neighborhoods. I know that's an issue that's important to you, not just in South Miami, but let's call it the county in general. And given what you also do as a land use, talk to me about how there's an interplay, if any, and what your thoughts are on how affordable housing is affecting not only your city, but maybe the county.
I mean, I think some of the most impactful testimony when we're hearing or having people come in and asking us to approve Sunset Place was from restaurant owners saying, I can't get staff to fill shifts because people can't afford to live near where they work. I'm not saying that Sunset Place is going to be the answer to that crisis, but again, if you believe in market economics, which as a Democrat, believe it or not, some of us do, supply and demand, there needs to be, right now, we're short on supply. and demand is very high in this market. And so no surprise that prices are rising. I've been an affordable housing advocate my entire career in one form or another, whether it was, running a trade association, nonprofits, building that stuff, trying to build that stuff, or working for a financial intermediary in Washington on those issues, or working as staff as an elected and private advocate, and now as an elected. It's the first time in my 25 plus year career now that the issue's been this prominent in public discussion. The situation is super acute, no surprise why. But the challenge is, the state did pass some legislation that was well intended. They continue to work on refinements. It's not perfect. What concerns me,
You're talking about the Live Local?
Live Local Act.
Yeah.
Live Local Act, for those of you who know what that is, which basically curtailed a lot of municipal authority in the zoning area to limit or impede development when there is a substantial affordable housing component. So those qualified projects are now like on an administrative track. No rezonings are required. No comp plan changes are required. In certain designations, they can just move forward. There are some very good economic incentives now with tax abatements for multiple decades built into that program to help shepherd them along. I think those are all positive developments. I'm not a fan of usurping local control that way, particularly because it's an imperfect strategy. People who want to act in bad faith are going to act in bad faith in life, unfortunately. And you can set up a lot of rules. If people aren't working towards a goal of being an inclusive community, they're not going to. My concern about a lot of the interventions currently is that we're going to see a lot of housing concentrated in certain communities. And I'm not saying it from a perspective of these are people earning substantial incomes. These are not the poorest of the poor for the most part. Very few truly affordable projects are being built under Live Local. It's mostly workforce housing. So you're talking about day households that are earning, probably upwards of $80,000 a year. So not insubstantial income. The challenge with that is that, we've got to figure out a way to penetrate some other communities that just have very limited development.
A lot of NIMBY going on, though.
A lot of limited development envelopes, and they can't get in there, right? And so I have been encouraging our delegation, the prime house sponsor that's drafting the next housing piece, to not just give us sticks, but as cities give us carrots. Because of my history, I have no problem, cooperating and seeing this house built. We want to figure out, and I think Commissioner Rodriguez has been a great addition to our board in that he wants to take our public assets that are not programmed for public uses and make them available for affordable workforce housing. And I totally agree. I think that's what we should be doing with public land to create more supply, particularly in our case where it's near our downtown, where there are a lot of job opportunities. But we need some carrots, right? Because we're going to lose tax base, and that's fine for a period of years. So what can the state do to help us deal with some other infrastructure needs? Acquiring green space, financing septic to sewer conversions, right? Can you put us at the front of the line? If we're working in good faith to allow these projects to come into our community, we should get some consideration for grant programs, discretionary grant programs at the state, and get prioritized for that funding. Those are the kind of carrots I think would at least really create a dynamic partnership where cities would embrace the mandate because they see that there's a benefit on the other side. Life is about incentives. And right now, unfortunately, all we have is a series of restraints and disincentives in the space from the municipal perspective. Lots of incentives for the private sector, but we need them as well because we are contributing a substantial part of our future tax base to support this development. And there still are some very necessary investments that we've got to make, which is why we went to the voters last year and said, look, we're expecting all this growth. We need to be in a position where we have access to the capital markets to borrow responsibly, to attract other resources to meet our future infrastructure demands.
There's something to be said about that reality because there was a lot of fiscal responsibility. And let me not say it that way. There was a surplus of dollars that were here when you came in, and eventually, right, every mayor, every commission has to deal with the reality that if I'm going to make up the numbers, even though I know them, but I know I'm not going to share them.
But you can. It's a public record.
Yeah, but for purposes, for purposes of where we were last year, a surplus, say, going up to $20 million, that might get to 50. And then at what point do you have enough there to say, you know what, we do need to reinvest. We do need to put something, say, for example, putting money into parks that don't have a dollar for dollar return on soccer and, in tennis and events and whatever, it's okay to take a loss on a park type situation.
I look, if you can find me a park anywhere in this country
makes
that
money,
makes money, I
Right.
want to
Yeah,
meet
they
that
don't.
person. I mean, they don't, but I think, one of the things that we struggled, the conversation on South Miami Park quite a bit. No secret to you being on our finance committee, and I think part of the opportunity we have, given where we are, is we have lacked the amenities to make us the most attractive small city in our county. And so part of that is amenitizing, whether it's libraries or parks, the community in a way where people have the option of driving 15 minutes to a state of the art facility as opposed to driving all the way to Kendall,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or Doral to try to procure the same service. I think in the long term, if we make those investments, it adds to the value of our tax base because we become a choice city where people want to live, right? Because they can meet all their needs of daily living within a very comfortable drive.
Yeah, you create your bubble.
Yeah, and as Miami grows and gets harder to get around, which we all know, I'm a native, you're a native,
Yeah.
right? We used to remember my parents bought a house on 137th and Coral Way, and my dad could drive downtown to work in 15 minutes. Those days are long gone, and so that time lost in travel, which is time away from your family, which is time away from productive work, becomes all the more valuable. And so if we can offer those amenities here in South Miami, I think it's only going to help.
Listen, when was the last time you and your wonderful wife decided to get in a car or take an Uber and go to like the beach for dinner?
It was on our anniversary, and we went for the full day. Honestly,
I mean, I remember we used to do that often.
all the time.
You'd go to Miami Beach when we were younger, you went for different reasons, but when you're older, we'd go there for dinner.
Yeah.
And then just as life has changed, you no longer had to do that because in our own city here, where you're the mayor, you got everything you need to say if you wanted to go out to eat, from affordable, from the least all the way up to the most expensive.
Yeah.
You can drop $20 for a party for two people, or you can drop 500. I do want to address a couple things. I know that last year, it's funny, and again, I mentioned because he was here last week, but with respect to moving the election to the day of the national election. And I know in the Gables, they did not end up doing that, but here in South Miami, we did. And I love that because for me personally, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, how could you not want to have more people engaged to vote? That's it. I don't think it's more, everyone should go out to vote, whether their vote is something you agree with or not. The more access, the better. And I do remember when I used to live here that in the city of South Miami, you'd have elections that would have 600, 700 people turn out. Less, probably. And my gosh, you could win an election by
It happened in February.
just having a party with 200 people
Correct.
that came to a local bar and voted for you, and then that was it. And there have been efforts, I remember, to bust some people in. But how did that come about? If you recall, was the turnout significantly different?
So it's a
night and
completely
day?
different electorate. I mean, so the origin story, really a credit to Commissioner Liebman again. Josh called me when I was in the State House, and one of my predecessors was Eric Crusson. And Eric I've known since we were kids. He's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, but we went to St. Teresa together. We've got that common history.
Didn't he go to the same high school too?
He went to the same high school. Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Horrible.
Come
All
on. So as a great Columbus grad, we had a conversation, and we both agreed to endorse the idea of moving the election. And look, I think it's I understand some of the concerns. Some jurisdictions, the impact of money has a great amount of distortion. South Miami is a community right now of like 5,280 homes, right? So I will tell you, and I will disabuse anyone of the notion that money is. It's always important to have money and resources to run a campaign, but there gets to a point in South Miami where the money becomes self-defeating, right? Because you only can send so many mail pieces or knock on so many doors right before you annoy the voter you're trying to convince to vote for you. We have the luxury that it's a small city, and so I had zero concerns that moving the election from, I think it was February to November, would result in the big money candidate always winning. And if people want proof of that example, the last election proved it out. Two guys worked super hard, both equally deserving of winning the seat. One had more resources than the other, not insubstantially so. And the guy with less resources won, because the universe, even with a larger turnout, which is, we had, I think turnout was north of 75% this November, whereas before you were lucky if you got 15% turnout, right? The universe is still small enough that you can speak to people one-on-one. And people still expect that. It's part of the culture of the community. And that doesn't change whether you move the election from February to November, in my opinion. I think it's been a fantastic thing. More people are engaged. More people are contributing. I think we're seeing the progress that we're seeing because the electorate is now really reflective of the full makeup and demographic of the city. Before it was a much narrow universe of people.
There are a couple of issues I want to make sure we touch on too before we ever wrap up today, and one of them I think is in a bigger, broader sense, which was, so let's start with this. So mayors in general are partyless positions. Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, doesn't matter if you're a Republican. As you and I both know, you can't even talk about it. It's like judges talking about their decisions when they're running for an election. But all you have to do is look at the last week and the Floridians that are getting nominated at a national level into these cabinet positions, from the Attorney General to our Secretary of State to
our local commissioner becoming an ambassador.
Right. So yeah. Right. So and then the results of things. It's a state that is pretty strong. It's no longer even referred to as a swing state like it was, say, 15 years ago. Does that dynamic, whether it be in Tallahassee or in Miami-Dade County itself, and the politics involved around all of that, does that, and I'm going to say it, not you. I've always looked at you as what I would consider to be a Democrat in their choice that is a family man that is really well positioned to have carried through to that if you ever wanted an office beyond this. But Florida's changed a bit. How, if any, do you see that and the impact that it would have either locally and not only in our county and stuff, but just in a general sense? Let's take ourselves out of South Miami a little bit.
Yeah, look, I don't put a whole lot of stock in the results of the last two cycles. I mean, has Miami-Dade County become more Republican than it was 15 years ago? I think the answer to that right now is yes, right? Is it impossible for a Democrat to win in Miami-Dade County? I think at all. I think actually,
or county mayor.
Well, but again, running in November.
Sure. Talk about right going beyond.
I think it's still. I think the mix is still there. I think the environment was a very difficult one. I think the bigger challenge for our state is that the politics are so imbalanced that it's self-defeating. Right? We're not having honest dialogue. As a member of the minority, I felt more empowered in Tallahassee than my colleagues that were line members of the majority.
Do you feel like you had a voice that you could express it?
I could express myself freely. I could say what I wanted in committee. You could
potentially even change minds. You could have honest.
I don't know how many minds. I think people respected what I had to say, but at the end of the day, leadership in an environment that is so uniparty dominant, it's four people in the process that dominate the conversation. It's a speaker, it's a Senate president, the appropriations chair, and maybe the governor. I think the governor in Florida, no disrespect to Governor DeSantis, is going to become more and more irrelevant over the next 2 years. And you saw the response to the call for the special session he put out, where the Senate president and House Speaker, my former colleague and friend, Danny Perez, responded immediately and said, we think this is premature, we think it's ill-timed, and we're going to talk about all these issues during the 60-day session, right? That would not have happened 2 years ago, right? Yeah. We'll show up, we'll come, and we'll do the work. But let's work out an agenda together. Let's not make this. Let's not politicize these issues any further. But for Democrats statewide, it's very difficult because what I'll call the transactional money is all aligned with Republican leadership. The donor universe is deflated. What my party has refused to do, it's still refusing to do today. When you read the talking points coming out of the Florida Democratic Party, is recognize that the issue set that we're talking about, I think there's a lot of, I think it's all just, right? But it's not resonant with voters, right? What's our economic message for Florida, right? How are we going to improve the day-to-day lives of families? I'm a big proponent of our teachers' unions and public education. Though I send my kids to public school, I would die on the hill for them in Tallahassee on those issues in committee and on the floor and debate those issues vigorously. And I can tell you without any reservation that our voucher system is an abject failure if the goal is to get kids in failing schools into a better situation. Yeah. It's become a subsidy for the middle class at this point. So because kids have one chance to learn, but my party has never developed an education message that speaks about parent empowerment and that speaks about, education being a singular opportunity for kids to develop the skills to advance their lives. right? And so, we have to be much more nimble about understanding where people are, and leading requires people to follow. And if you could be right in your mind about all the issues, but if nobody else agrees with you, you're not leading anyone, right? You're just
Yep.
talking to yourself. And unfortunately, we have put ourselves in an echo chamber where all we do is talk to people who agree with ourselves. We've got to get beyond that niche of people. We've got to figure out a way to connect with independents, with disaffected Republicans. And there is a political coalition to be built in the state. I still think it's a very purple state, notwithstanding the results. Charlie Crist was the absolute worst pick we could have had to run statewide. I was asked to be.
He's out of parties, by the way.
He's out
Can't
of
choose-
he's out of
can't choose
parties.
any-
But look, like or love Ron DeSantis, what I respect about him is that he takes no prisoners, right? He goes after what he wants. He defines himself very clearly, and voters respect and appreciate people that take action, in my opinion.
It's one of the conversations I've had, and,
Yeah.
and obviously we get all,
Yeah.
politicized, all charged. And we talked earlier about a mutual friend that he and I do that too. And I think that to your point, I think that is a reality, like him or not.
Yeah.
Speaking of our governor, the reality of it is that he takes a strong stance on things. And
Look at what he just did on weed and on the ballot initiatives.
he takes,
Is there an argument that he should be using public money to campaign against those things?
Sure.
Absolutely. But there's no ambiguity about where he is, right? And I think voters want that kind of leadership, or at least respect it. And
the position could be different.
Yeah.
It's the manner in which it's messaged. I
Correct,
agree
yeah.
with you 100% there. And it's funny as I say this, because people tell me all the time, as somewhat of a, polarizing, whether in a small circle or something else, on the Republican side, married to a Democrat. How does that happen at home? And I told them, well, I mean, there's a lot of wine usually, but no, the reality of it is that I think you would probably agree with this statement, even whether the number is 80% or 90%, people agree on 80 to 90% of things. And regardless of your party, it's the fighting happens over the 10 to 15% that is injected into us all the time in some sort of dysfunctionary way, whether it be social media, whether it be the news, whether it be whatever it is. But I think at the end of the day, if you and I sat here and we talked about things, green spaces, better for the community, increasing public services for individuals, taking care of the
access to
disadvantaged,
healthcare issues.
who's going to say no to any of those things? I don't disagree with you, and I don't know when the day is going to come that the polarization of where we are is going to change. I know I pray often, and you and I are both Christians. I pray often that the messaging on term 2 for number 45, number 47 will somehow be different to try and take us down a path. I wish if Trump spoke like Obama, we would just have different. The policy would be different. If he could speak like Obama, that was like a lullaby to go to sleep, even if you disagreed with his policies.
It's conciliatory. I mean, I think that's, we all have to see ourselves in our government, right? We have to feel that we're connected. The day some of us feel disaffected is when we become dangerous. And I think,
that's true.
And I think Mike, yes, you're 100% right. I think the president does himself, or not president again, does himself a disservice sometimes in the way he communicates, because it makes people feel disaffected.
It makes people feel disaffected. And the last issue I definitely want to touch, and there's probably a joke in here about us ending political conversations on sewage. I don't, but I don't want to end without something that is happening, which was important, right? I think there's a new pumping station, and it's a big deal, man. I'm on septic still in Pinecrest. And like South Miami, Pinecrest has pockets of.
So if you're really interested in the issue, on February 13th, I'm on a panel with Commissioner Regalado at Casa Cuba for one of the morning community newspaper sessions. We're talking about septic to sewer conversions. A little.
I think those things are at 8 a.m.
Miami Community
Tommy,
newspapers.
You would know. Aren't those things like at 8 a.m. usually?
7:30 this morning. 7:30.
Yeah. So I wanted to show up half an hour late. So 7:30 on February 13th.
Yeah, so a little plug for their event. Should be a fun conversation. I say often to Raquel Regalado, she's the only person who can make shit sexy, right? But we are a guinea pig in this process. One of the, beyond the fact that we have in some parts of the neighborhood I live in, failing systems that are obviously critical to the operation of one's home. We all have a deep concern for the quality of our bay. I believe you're a boater, right? Yep. And we've all seen how that ecosystem has changed, not for the better, over the last couple of decades. And a lot of what's happening to the bay is what's coming out of our homes, right? So the septic to sewer conversion is not just an imperative about making your home and your system better. It has a very direct impact on our economy because the Bay is a substantial part of it. It's the postcard, right? In the tourist bureau's messaging around South Florida, along with our beaches. And it's also about our environmental water quality long term. We've started a process. We've been trying to leverage other people's money at the state and federal level and successfully done that here. I think the tune of just under $6 million for this first project, and have started it. It's been painful. I will tell you, not a wise thing to not build an infrastructure contemporaneous with your home. I've lived it for the last 6 months. We're now through the worst of it on my street. When I got into office, became aware of a project at Dante Fussell Park, which is to build a new tennis center. And we had a
new bathrooms are going in there
2017 plan to convert, for all these septic to sewer plans. We had designed the basin in my neighborhood, and I'll put any money to put that project to work. And I was going to be damned if I was going to connect a new building to sewer. So we came up with a first phase, went to Tallahassee, got money, and have begun to execute it. And I'm hopeful within the next year and a half to 2 years, we'll be done with everything south of 80th Street in that basin if we can cobble together the rest of the money. My goal is to not use our bond money and our general fund money, our capital money as a city to do it, because the truth is for cities, there's no return on that investment directly. Because as soon as we build it, we turn that over to the county. But it's a necessary investment for climate adaptation reasons with our rising water table, and if we want to protect Biscayne Bay, whatever is left of it. So that's why we're doing it. Hopefully, people will appreciate. I think some neighbors do. Some people right now are not very happy with me because they're living not exactly perfect experience.
Inconvenient.
But that's just the way. That's just the way it goes. Sometimes.
The way it goes. Well, man, I appreciate that you came out here, man, that you spent some time. I'm going to echo a few things and then give you the floor to say a few things before we end up. But I started by saying thank you, not for coming. I mean, I do thank you for that, but for running, for being mayor. One of the reasons I got involved with this because I love politics, the good and the bad of it. I'm the first one that sometimes gets dragged into a rabbit hole to have some conversations I wish I would take back. But then at the same time, I'm always thankful, no matter what party you are, for the people that end up doing what you're doing, because not enough of us run. When I say good people don't run, it's not that good people are not in office. I agree with you. A vast majority of them are. What I mean by is I think the pool of people who decide that putting some sort of a bullseye on them in some way, either because they make a decision that is a good one and with good intention, but is viewed poorly, or simply because there's nefarious situations and outside forces that want to put one on you for self-serving purposes for themselves. The reality of it is Josh Liebman, who we've talked about a couple of times, once told me, it takes armor to hold office. I think city of South Miami being smaller, and a nice mix of people maybe doesn't always fall into needing a ton of armor here as you would maybe a bigger city. But thank you, man, for everything that you do, for being in the city, for taking care of the people, for now being involved in the spearheading of what is going to be the largest development change in South Miami. When I used to live here, it was a very large anti-development aging crowd who wanted it to look the same way it did in 1950. And that reality we all knew needed to change in some way. And the fact that you're at the head of it, the fact that, I'll echo this again, that you're a land use attorney that gives you a needed perspective, I think, on some of that too, and that you're a family man, and you started the entire podcast with a story of your own daughter and how that inspired you to move forward. I do the same thing. There's a lawyer joke in there too.
There probably is.
That you and I don't think as lawyers we're going to live a good legacy. And I don't disagree with you. What did Dad do for 50 years? In your case, you can say he was the mayor of the city that we lived in, and he helped the city out, and I wrote a legislation, and the legacy starts to write itself.
But, I thank you for the compliment, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I really want to thank my team, which is my colleagues on the commission, for being incredible partners, both present and the past members, our management team and our line staff, police officers, public works, parks and recreation staff. They make us look good every single day, but we get too much credit as elected officials for the job that we do. Probably the most impactful people in my life and the most impactful role I've had as a person is with the title coach. And so, for people who are out there who, this is something they have no interest in doing, what I would ask is get involved in your community somehow, right? As a tutor, as a coach, as a mentor, beyond my parents, people like Butch Brassey, who's a football coach of mine, Pat Garrett, same, former mentors and teachers are the people that allowed me to have the foundation to do the work I'm doing today, right? Not just the foundation in terms of the preparation, but the confidence, the people who pick me up at my lowest points in my life allowed me to have the success I'm having today. So to them, I'm grateful. And for all of us out there, if this is not your cup of tea, being on a dais, running for office, having to knock on doors, there's a million ways to get engaged. And my only prayer is that you make the time to do that, because you'll never know whose life you're going to transform by touching them.
That's the best. And Mayor, thank you again. And for those of you that are listening, I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did today. I do have to give a plug that if you found value in the conversation, please subscribe to the Back Porch on your favorite podcast platform. Leave us a review. Tell me where we could be better. Tell me, and make suggestions, even feedback. And follow us on social media for exclusive contact updates, behind the scenes moments. Just search for the Back Porch podcast. So until next time, I'm Alex Amazon, friend of our mayor, father, and local business owner here in the city of South Miami. And I'll see you right back here on another day at the Back Porch.
Thanks for watching the Back Porch podcast. To stay up to date on upcoming podcasts and guests, like and follow us on social media for the latest updates. To keep this podcast part of a greater dynamic dialogue, we encourage your comments, and we'll see you next time on the Back Porch.